For nearly a year, the United States has conducted dozens of deadly aerial attacks on small boats in international waters in the Caribbean Sea and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And believe it or not, these strikes are still happening. According to the U.S. Southern Command, the U.S. killed 4 unnamed people in a strike on a boat in the Caribbean Sea yesterday and another 2 in a strike on Sunday in the Eastern Pacific. By MS Now's ongoing count, the United States has killed at least 227 unnamed people in 68 strikes. The administration claims that the boats are carrying illicit drugs from Venezuela to American shores and says the people on board are members of a narco-terrorist drug cartel. The U.S. government has put forth absolutely no evidence, not once, to prove that these boats are carrying drugs, are heading to the United States, or are manned by people involved in the drug trade. Besides which, drug trafficking is not a crime that is punishable by death in the United States. And killing people as if they are wartime combatants instead of arresting them is illegal under international law. And while the administration calls the people killed in U.S. strikes, quote, unlawful combatants, meaning participants in a war, and while the administration has publicly stated that America is, quote, waging war, end quote, there's been no declaration of war from Congress or authorization for the use of non-war military force as mandated by law. The administration hasn't even asked for that. So either these strikes violate international law and essentially amount to extrajudicial killings, or the U.S. is in an illegal and undeclared war. No matter how these strikes are viewed, rationalized or justified, they are illegal. And you'll recall that these strikes are what led 6 lawmakers, all with military and intelligence backgrounds, to release a video reminding U.S. service members that they swore an oath to the Constitution and the law, and that they have a duty to refuse illegal and unlawful orders. Well, Trump called that reminder, quote, seditious behavior punishable by death, end quote. At the same time, these illegal boat strikes are happening. We're nearing the 6-month mark since the start of another illegal military conflict initiated by President Trump, the war with Iran. Today, Trump told Al Jazeera that he's, quote, not in a hurry and has no time schedule at all to return to talks to end the war because, quote, we're winning very big, end quote. New MS Now reporting reveals what a tangible and profound effect these illegal strikes, orders, and wars are having on American service members. MS Now's Priya Sridhar and Peggy Hellman spoke to 5 troops who want out of the military because what they saw in recent months challenged their moral beliefs. Quote, the reason they cited included being ordered to violate international law, seeing the civilian death toll as a result of American military intervention surge, and their concerns over extended deployments with no clear mission or strategy, end quote. MS Now has also learned that the number of service members seeking a formal discharge from the military as conscientious objectors has skyrocketed. That's according to 2 groups that helped them file their applications. One group has even seen applications increase by 6 times their normal rate since the start of the war with Iran, adding that the rate right now is higher than at any point in the past 25 years. That means it's higher than at any point during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Joining me now is the MS Now reporter behind that important reporting, MS Now's Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar. Priya is also an officer in the United States Navy Reserve. Priya, thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time. You have a couple of huge stories out just today, but this issue of soldier morale, of conscientious objecting in an environment where we're not in a draft. These are people who signed up to be in the military. They knew what they were getting into, and they're. What is it? Is this morale? Is this what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. And I think it's even more fascinating given the fact that we consistently hear from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that we're seeing record numbers of recruits joining the military. And I think one of the things that's unique about these conscientious objectors in comparison to years past is that some of them have been in the military for more than 10 years. A lot of the activists that I spoke to who helped these applicants try to exit the military were saying that they represent all enlisted and officer ranks up to major. Many of them have attended service academies like West Point and the Naval Academy. So these aren't people simply who stumbled into the military or who only have been there for a year or 2. These are people who were incredibly patriotic and chose the military as a career because they believed that they were serving our country. And I spoke to one service member who was deployed in support of Operation Epic Fury, which of course is the military campaign, the war in Iran. And this service member told told me that they were being ordered to target and bomb civilian infrastructure, which, as we both know, is a violation of international humanitarian law, according to the Geneva Conventions. And when the service member tried to bring up those concerns with their chain of command, they were told repeatedly, no, these bridges and other pieces of civilian infrastructure are actually dual use. So they're used both for civilian purposes and for military purposes. But of course, that justification wasn't good enough for this service member. I also spoke to two service members who were deployed in support of Operation Southern Spear, which you spoke about, these boat strikes that have been conducted over the last year. And they told me, just as you outlined, that they didn't believe as though there was sufficient evidence or justification that the people that they were bombing and killing in these strikes on these small vessels were in fact, quote unquote, narco terrorists. They were concerned that they were perhaps killing innocent fishermen. So it's a combination of being concerned that they're violating international law. Another common theme I heard from all of them was the surge in civilian deaths, many of them citing that Manab school bombing, which killed, of course, 150 schoolgirls and teachers. Of course, the United States hasn't taken any responsibility for that, but it's still under investigation right now. And then that last piece, Ali, which, circles back to a lot of my reporting that I've been doing on the USS Abraham Lincoln, what I've heard from the service members and their families, which is just that these folks don't understand what it is that we're waging war against. They thought that the military was supposed to be used as a last resort in the name of national defense, not to just go around the world. In one case, one of the service members said this to me, just bombing people randomly. And that's basically how they feel right now.
This other reporting that you have tonight on the 19-year-old sailor who jumped off the USS Lincoln earlier this month in what his wife has described as an attempt to take his own life. He now faces disciplinary action from the Navy, again, according to his wife and charging documents that you've reviewed. Family members of those serving on board that ship have told MS Now that their loved ones have described emotional strain, mental health problems over the course of an unusually long deployment. And again, long deployments are one thing. Understanding what the purpose of the deployment is yet another in order to maintain morale of the soldiers and sailors out there.
Yeah, there are so many contributing factors, I think, that are, making morale on that ship low. And just in general, one is the continuous extension of the deployment and not knowing when exactly they're going to return home, not having a port call, the conditions that we've discussed so much, not having food, supply shortages, and then also the simple exhaustion of working these 12 to 14-hour days. So now we've learned that this 19-year-old sailor who did, in fact, jump off the ship on August 3rd and was medically evacuated back to San Diego is now facing disciplinary charges from the Navy. Wow. They're alleging that he violated two different articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. One of them is that he basically faked his illness or injury to avoid work or his duty. And the other one is that he left his post without authorization. So I think it's really fascinating to see that this is what the Navy is deciding to do with this sailor. And, his wife told me that he got back to the United States almost 2 weeks ago. And the first time he actually had a therapy appointment was today. He went to the hospital for 5 days, but she said in the course of those 5 days, they were mainly doing physical checkups and, checking his vitals. And instead, it looks like they're spending most of their time trying to figure out how to punish this sailor. Wow. And ultimately, Ali, his pay could be docked by half. And he's 19 years old. He has a 5-month-old and a 3.5-year-old. He joined the Navy to give a better life for his family and provide financial stability to them.